Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Hey everybody, this is Lij Shaw, and welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, the podcast from the recording studio, interviewing producers, engineers, recording studio owners, gear makers, and anybody else that is a rock star of the studio. First off, let me remind you to visit recordingstudiorockstars.com. You'll find tons of free YouTube content and video tutorials, blog articles, and links, of course, to all the show notes from the podcast so that you can follow up with some of these great producers and learn more about them. So why did I start Recording Studio Rockstars, the podcast? I started listening to podcasts a few years ago. There's a huge list of podcasts out there, whether it's insights into business, technology, health, life. And of course, I was so excited when I found podcasts about the recording studio and started looking for insights, tips, techniques, tricks, and interviews with professionals. But I was frustrated when I found that many of the podcasts out there were discontinued, outdated, didn't really have insights that I was looking for, or were inconsistent in their content. There just simply weren't enough interviews with the pros that I could really get excited about listening to their stories. I personally love listening to podcasts on long drives in the car, or when I'm at the gym working out, or just chilling outside of the studio. I realize that a lot of us who are making music and recording, we might be listening to things all day long. So our listening time is really valuable and important. Wherever it is that you like to listen to podcasts, I want to create a show for you to hear inspiring stories from inspiring people. Because I remember what it's like to start out and be hungry for stories from the studio. When I began, I just wanted to be able to hang out in the studio to watch and learn. There was so much I wanted to figure out, and I didn't have the experience and I didn't have the access yet. And today I get lots of emails from students of recording who are wanting to intern in the studio, learn more about recording. And I do have interns here at the studio, but it's frustrating to me that I can't help them all out. In fact, just the other day, I had lunch with 3 new students looking for an opportunity to be in the recording studio, start making music, and have the experience and opportunity to learn. But I couldn't bring them all into the studio. There just isn't enough opportunity there. And by creating Recording Studio Rockstars, it's an opportunity for me to give more access to the recording studio to more people. Through the podcast, through the YouTube videos, through the blog articles, and through the coursework. So I thought I would start out by giving you a little insight into who I am. I'm Lij Shaw. I've been making records now for 25 years, both my own music in my own bands and producing, engineering, mixing, and mastering other clients' records. And at this point, I'm an award-winning, chart-breaking music and podcast producer and owner of a Grammy award-winning recording studio here in East Nashville called the Toy Box Studio. But I didn't get here overnight. It took me lots of opportunity and practice and a whole process to go from being inspired in music to creating a lifestyle for myself where I get to make music for a living. I live in East Nashville, Tennessee now, but I grew up in New England on the East Coast. Till I was about 6 years old, I was in Brooklyn, New York, moved up to Massachusetts, and lived in the suburbs through high school. In the summers, my family would get together up in Maine, and then we'd get together up in Wisconsin on Lake Michigan. And at these gatherings, there was always a lot of music going around. There was somebody playing piano or somebody singing songs. My uncles would get together on the porch and sing these great songs in harmony together. You know, they'd gone to colleges and been in glee clubs and learned how to harmonize together. And it was always inspiring to me. And one of my uncles played a lot of guitar, and he learned all the old cowboy tunes and would sit and fingerpick and sing those on the porch. As a kid, I took Suzuki violin lessons for a few years and then kind of put that aside. And it wasn't until high school later when I started to take some piano lessons again here and there. And my high school had an awesome music teacher, and he built a small 4-track recording studio in a closet. I loved it. It was totally amazing. That was the first time I got to take a class that started to teach me a little bit about the theory of music and how to record music. Then my senior year of high school, my dad gave me a guitar for a birthday present. That was the beginning of the end for me. Over that same summer, my uncle taught me a few chords on the guitar. I still remember it. E, A, and B7. Those were the 1, 4, 5 chords that I needed to start learning how to play blues. He told me it was the root of all music, and it was the first thing I needed to learn on guitar. Well, by the time school started and I had my new guitar at home, I remember I would just sit around banging out guitar chords in my bedroom until I got in trouble from my stepdad. But at that point in my life, I didn't really see music as an option. It was a new interest to me, but it wasn't something that I considered as a career choice. I had interests in art and science, and after some thought, decided that probably I should be going to school for architecture or engineering. I went to architecture school, went through all the programs. I thought that's what I was going to be doing for a life. But meanwhile, I was also playing in bands and playing more and more guitar with my friends while I was in college. I didn't recognize it at the time, but playing in bands was my real passion, not architecture. In fact, one of my bands, my senior year, even won the country music category for the Blueberry Hills Song Competition in St. Louis, Missouri. And we got to go into a studio and cut our first record. After I graduated college, I decided to do some backpacking and travel around the world for a year. I spent a couple of months riding trains all over Europe, brought a guitar with me, had a blast just playing songs and jamming with friends, and finally ended up in London as a bartender, living in a shared apartment space with some other friends. Well, it wasn't but a month into it when I got a call from my brother, who was still in college at this point, but he was doing a year of studies all the way on the other side of the world in Hong Kong, China. And he said, "Lij, I'm playing drums in this blues band while I'm here. We've got 5 gigs a week already and we need a guitar player. You want to come to Hong Kong and be in a band with me?" I thought about it for a week, and then I bought myself a ticket to Hong Kong. So of all the strange places to go and begin your musical journey, mine started on the other side of the world in Hong Kong, China, where I spent a half a year playing guitar every single day in a blues band with my brother and some other friends there. And I began to really fall in love with music and the whole process of music. While we were in Hong Kong, we had another opportunity to record an original song for a compilation and ended up being invited into a professional recording studio. It was the first time I had ever seen a real studio. They had a full mixing console, tape machines, there were lights and knobs everywhere, and I just thought it was the coolest thing I had ever seen. That was ultimately my aha moment. I remember sitting there in the control room, looking around at all this stuff and thinking to myself, I think I could do this. I think this is what I want to do. I need to go find a school for recording music so I can learn how to do this stuff. This turns me on. This is awesome. And I'd never really felt that way about the architecture before. So no disrespect to architecture. I think it's an amazing art form. I just wasn't personally passionate about it. But I was passionate about music and recording music. So as I finished up my half year in Hong Kong, I had already made up my mind that when I got back here, I was going to find a school for recording music and see if I could learn how to do it. Well, that led me down to Nashville. One of the schools really stood out to me. It was Middle Tennessee State University in Nashville, Tennessee. And at that point, they had just built a huge dedicated facility with multiple recording studios in it and had a great program, and also for a ridiculously inexpensive tuition fee. So I made up my mind and I moved down to Nashville, Tennessee. I had a great experience learning all the technical aspects of recording, everything about how the gear works, to how consoles, tape machines, and DAWs work, and came out of school 2.5 years later with a Bachelor's of Science in Recording Engineering. At the end of my schooling, I started my internship and had an amazing opportunity at a studio right here in East Nashville called Woodland Studios. This is a beautiful, classic, old-school recording studio where lots of famous records have been made. And while I was there in the studio, there were records being made by Keith Urban, Emmylou Harris, Alison Krauss. In fact, I even had an opportunity to meet the incredible producer Daniel Lanois while I was interning at the studio. And the internship for me wasn't even in the recording studio. They didn't have an opening to be an assistant engineer, but what they did have an opening for was a technical internship where I could learn all about wiring and connecting and troubleshooting gear. So I took it. I thought it was a great opportunity. I thought it was a great place, and I really loved learning the technical aspect of recording. But ultimately that internship finished, and now it was time for me to get out there in the world and find myself a job. So I delivered pizzas for about a half a year, Till one day I was doing a U-turn in an intersection trying to get a pizza somewhere on time, and bam, car smashed into me and I wrecked my car. That was the last non-music job I ever had. I decided it was time for me to get it together and get a job in a studio. So I started hitting the pavement and going around to studios looking for work. While I was interning at Woodland Studios, there had been a record that came through with an artist named Jill Sobule, produced by Robin Eaton and Brad Jones. And it was the record that really resonated with me during my internship. I used to hear the music coming out of the control room, and I thought, that music is cool. That's the kind of music I want to work on. After my pizza job was done and I was at the record store one day, I found Jill Sobule's new record that they had finished. And I took it home, listened to it. I thought it was awesome, fantastic record. One of the best things I'd heard that year. So when I turned over the record, I found the name of the studio. It was a place called Alex the Great. It still exists in Berry Hill, which is another part of Nashville. And I looked up the phone number for this studio in the Yellow Pages. Now you have to understand something. Typically, a professional studio has a variety of engineers and producers and bands coming in to make records. They make a record and then they would leave. The thought of me calling the studio and asking for one of the producers was a real shot in the dark, and most likely I was going to get the answer that they weren't there and it wasn't somebody I could talk to. But I happened to luck out because this particular studio was one that was owned by the producers, and so when I called, Brad answered the phone and I got to talk to him. Next thing you know, we scheduled a meeting. I got to come over and hang out with him. He said they did have an opportunity. They were looking for more interns and engineers at the studio. Why don't you come on over and learn the room, be in here and get to know the studio? I'll give you the studio for a great rate for the weekend. You can bring in a band of your own. So I called up a buddy of mine in St. Louis. He knew another band that was looking to record. We got together. They drove down from St. Louis, and we went in on a Friday night. And I don't think we got any sleep until about Sunday when it was time for them to drive back to St. Louis. And we got a song recorded from start to finish. And it was just one of the most exciting, magical experiences for me at the time. I absolutely loved it and had a blast. So I was definitely in the right place and on the right path. Shortly after that, I got to assist on a record for a small band on an independent label, and I was offered $50 a day for a week. I was in heaven. I thought that was the coolest thing, and I was so excited. The record went great, and that led to another 3-4 years of working and assisting at this studio with these guys. So I really cut my teeth at Alex the Great. Fast forward, and I spent the next 15 years producing and recording bands, and I traveled a lot on the road as well. I got to work with lots of studios and with lots of great producers and engineers, some amazing people like Steve Albini at Electrical Studios in Chicago, Tom Lord-Alge down in Miami, Florida, and Ben Gross at the Mix Room in Los Angeles. When I started out in school, we had the earliest version of Pro Tools, and I've been using Pro Tools all the way up to the most recent version. And so I've learned how to work on production and recording, from doing everything completely by hand to the present, where we have these fast, easy, and automated tools. For example, before Beat Detective, we used to align drums by manually chopping them all up and lining them up to the grid. And also, I remember when they invented auto-tuning. Before that, we used to have to get really creative with it, like renting an Eventide H3000 and punching in the individually tuned notes back onto the tape machine. Well, after many years of recording in various studios all over the place and having lots of experiences with different bands, I was able to build a studio right here in East Nashville, Tennessee called the Toy Box Studio. You can visit my website to learn more about the studio at thetoyboxstudio.com. Now I have the immense pleasure of walking across my own backyard to get to work every day. I've also been very fortunate to have some of the best interns working with me in the studio, and I love teaching and helping them better understand how to make records efficiently and creatively to sound killer so that they can capture the visions of the artists and the bands. So I created this podcast and the Recording Studio Rockstars brand to reach you and help you learn how to take your recordings to the next level. I want you to have the experience of feeling like you were invited into the studio to hang out with some of the rock stars of the industry and ultimately feel like you got to be there with us hanging out in the studio. I know you can't physically be here interning with me in the studio, but you can virtually. So thanks so much for listening to this. I can't wait to meet you and learn more about what you're doing with your music and your recordings. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can email me directly at lij@recordingstudiorockstars.com. That's LIJ at recordingstudiorockstars.com. rockstars, plural.com. And the best way to stay in the loop is to sign up for the email list so I can send you videos, blog articles, and other resources and materials to help you with your recordings. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And if you enjoy the podcast, then please remember to subscribe. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help reach more people. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And if you want more free content, all you have to do is text RS Rockstars to 33444. Again, that's RS Rockstars to 33444, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, and podcast updates. And I'll let you know about any upcoming giveaway offers, all totally free. Thanks for listening. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.